Hey, everybody. Since the recording of this episode with Mike McKay on the Nicoletti Show podcast, Mike has done over 15 deals here in Jacksonville since moving here. So just wanted to give you the update, and now we are going to dive in on the Mike McKay episode. Hey everybody, my name is Al Nicoletti. I'm an attorney here in Florida, and welcome to the Al Nicoletti Show, where I bring on real estate super investors, rising rock stars, movers and shakers, and leaders of clubs in their communities that educate, entertain, and inspire all things real estate and Florida real estate on how you can take your company to the next level. On my show today, I have Michael McKay. Mike and I randomly connected on a Yellowbird event that happened about, I think, around October or November. We'll talk about that with him. But we were doing virtual meetings because Yellowbird was meeting in person up until March. And so they reconfigured their whole structure. And I want to say it was like halfway through the meeting and they're having this remote table go around. Mike came into my table when I was hosting probate and tax deeds, and he was hanging out. He introduced himself. He said, "Hey, I'm Michael McKay. I'm moving down to Jacksonville, Florida. I'm in Connecticut. I'm from New York, and I am ready to tackle this whole Jacksonville market." And he's like, "I heard all about you." I'm like, "Wait a second. How, what's this about?" And we instantly connected from there. Mike is amazing guy. He understands all the short-term rentals. He was doing a lot of the real estate up in the New York, Connecticut markets. But on the show, when I introduce him, we're going to dive into a lot of what Mike wants to talk about, which is moving to Jax and a whole new market. What's that like? How do you deal with it? So many are moving from California and going to Texas or going to Tennessee and Florida. It's like moving to a new market's different. And marketing for deals using data. Mike is all about marketing. And backstage, we were talking about all the things he wants to talk about. And he's like, "We're talking about marketing for this show, 100%. And automating his real estate business. It's all about systemization, automation, and how do you do it? How do you do it on a level to scale your business and make sure your business is efficient? We're going to dive into all that. So without further ado, Mike, welcome to the Al Nicoletti Show. And you know I'm so happy to have you on here. We clicked instantly on that thing. When you came down to Jacksonville, you're like, "Let's get breakfast," and the whole COVID thing happened. But let's meet, and I'm so happy to have you here. So welcome.
It's great to be on, Al. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. And, you had so much stuff to say, even when we first met, about what you're trying to do in this market and in the short-term rentals, diving into Airbnb. So for those of you that don't know you out there, introduce yourself, let them know who you are, and tell everybody, before you got into real estate, what were you doing? And now what are you doing with all of your real estate marketing and your stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, I've kind of been a lifelong entrepreneur. I started my first company when I was 15 years old. That was a custom t-shirt business. After that, when I was 16, I launched an online store. That was kind of just at the beginning when e-commerce was just starting to be a thing. So that was 14 years ago. So learned a lot, had a lot of businesses over the years. When I was in college, I started a nightlife promotion business in New York City when I was going to school there. Really tiring business, lots of long hours, but making the amount of money that most people don't even make until after they graduate. While I was in school, covering all my, expenses related to school there. I jumped into real estate about 6 years ago. Do you want to hear how I got into it? I can tell you.
Oh yeah, no, we all have to hear that because you're in this market. And for those of you that don't know Mike, when Mike first came down here, he's like, "All right, we got to meet. Let's have lunch, breakfast, whatever we got to do." And then you had that mindset, Mike, of, who else could I meet? Like, who do you think are really good connections? And so, we talked about those connections, and then you're already, having lunch and stuff with them, and you're really good at building that network. So it's absolutely important how you got into it, because it's really where it's leading you today and really expanding in the Jacksonville market.
So I got into real estate about 6 or 7 years ago. When I was in college, I had studied abroad in Barcelona, and it was after I graduated. I think I just graduated, or maybe it was just before graduation. And my girlfriend and I wanted to take a trip back there, for about 10 days. I had a friend still living over there. We were going to stay with him. And I heard about this thing called Airbnb. I was living in an apartment with 5 other people in New York City at the time, kind of on a college budget. And I told my roommate, I said, "Hey, I heard about this Airbnb thing. I don't know if anyone actually uses this thing, because this is a while back. And I said, look, I want to put up my room. Are you guys okay with me putting my room up, $100 a night or something? If I told my roommate, Evan, I said, hey, if you can help meet the guests and clean or whatever, I'll give you some of the profit. I don't know if anyone's actually going to book, but I might as well try to make some money to pay for this Barcelona trip. He said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. So I put it up, and immediately I booked all 10 days at $100 a night, and it paid for my round trip flight to Barcelona and part of actually my stay there. And I was like, wow, this is a real thing. So that's kind of when I first got the spark to do it. When I moved to my next apartment, I actually got an extra bedroom specifically for Airbnb. And for years I had that in New York City. I mean, New York City rents aren't cheap. And I was actually getting paid to live in my apartment.
Really?
Pretty much the entire rest of my time I was in New York City. So that's kind of what sparked it. I became an agent in New York City. A friend of mine had started a tech forward real estate brokerage. And then the story continues how I got more into doing a lot of short-term rental stuff, some long-term rentals, and we can dive more into that after, but that's a longer story.
Oh, for sure. And it's funny when you were talking about doing the nighttime promotion, that's also a whole other world, where and that's probably where your marketing skills came from too, right? Because you have to sell, you have to be able to talk to people and say, look, there's a great event happening tonight, be there, there's good stuff, great artists. So when we'll dive into all the marketing stuff, but it's interesting to hear people's backgrounds when I do these podcasts, because you can tell a lot about what they were doing before and how it translated to the thing they still love, which you love marketing, you love the sell, you love to it's a game of trying to see who comes and how many you can get, and it's all fun. So we will dive into that. Mike, your big thing is the short-term rental markets. And so many people really want to get involved in that. And so you saw the upside to it when you were doing your trips and everything. And then you're in New York City, it was working out. So talk to us about what short-term rentals are for people that are listening that don't have a clue what a short-term rental is on the basic level. So what is the short-term rental market, and how do you get in it, and what are you looking for when it comes to those specs? Because I'm sure you have different parameters about what is a good rental, right? Versus that's not going to be good cash flow. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I look at a short-term rental as you're renting something for less than a month, right? Traditional rental, you're renting out usually for a year. There's kind of a middle tier, which I call the corporate rental, which is a month or more, and you're trying to make partnerships with companies who come to a city a lot. But short-term is really I'll take one night, right? That's what I consider a short-term rental. And there's a couple things that I'd like to look out for. First of all, you have to use data to see which areas are going to be well performing. And there's a couple of different models. Most of the models that I've done in the past is actually, what people don't realize is you actually don't have to own the property to do a short-term rental. They call it rent arbitrage. So you can rent the apartment, let's say or the house, let's say you're paying $2,000 a month in rent, but on a short-term rental, people will pay more, so you can get $5,000 a month. So you have your spread there, but you have to keep in mind, obviously, your management costs are a lot more because there's turnover and you clean. Normal 1-year lease, you're turning it over maybe every couple of years. You're turning this property over every 3 or 4 nights. So there's a couple things to keep in mind there. And the other thing that I always tell people when they're looking to get into short-term rentals is, you really need high gross numbers. I won't really look at a deal where the building will bring in less than $4,500 a month gross, because there are those, the numbers look really good on paper. If your normal rent's $1,000 and you can get $2,000 or $2,500 a month on short-term rental, but after cleaning, all the fees the channels take, all your expenses, it's not really worth the extra effort. So you got to think return on time as well as, return on the dollars you're putting in. So there's a lot of different models in the short-term rental space. I had done a lot of lease arbitrage stuff, but in the future, I'm going to look a lot more towards buying, so I can capture that equity upside too that you do with a long-term rental.
So when you're saying short-term rental, are you referring to the Airbnb, the VRBO, or you're referring to those ones that are 1 day to 5 days, or it could be 2 months, but it's not a full-on 6-month lease, 1-year lease kind of strategy, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, there's all those channels and you want to be across all of them. That's another, I mean, a mistake that people make is they'll rely too much on only Airbnb or only VRBO. But yes, I mean, that's how you kind of market your property to get guests, or the equivalent of a tenant, which is a guest.
Right. So you brought that, you're bringing that whole area that you really enjoy down to the Jacksonville market. You've moved back to Jacksonville in I think it was November. I think you had emailed me and you said you were in November, but then yeah, that all happened. So you're bringing this whole niche and you're bringing short-term rentals to your industry. How are you doing the two and two together? So you're moving and then bringing it. How are you finding that new market for yourself and moving to a new market like Florida?
Yeah. So I've actually postponed looking at the short-term rentals till, later in this year or early next year, because I really want to learn the market here and I really just want to build an acquisitions engine this year in Jacksonville, right? Get the marketing down, hire an acquisitions guy towards the end of the year and really get those kind of deals flowing, and then apply like the best strategy to it. So if it's a great short-term rental property, great. I already know how to do that. But how am I learning the Jacksonville market? A couple ways. I mean, before I came down here, I looked at some data, what are the zip codes that investors are transacting in, where are the cash transactions for people who don't live there. And then it's, conversations like you and I had, going to the Yellowbird online meetup, which like 5 people told me I should go to. So I went, I met a bunch of people there. And then it's, I sit down with people like you and I say, who should I know in this market? Who should I talk to? And that's something I kind of learned over the years back in New York when I was a real estate agent. I had helped start a BNI networking group, and I really learned a lot how to improve my networking skills there. And it's always, who do you know? Who is kind of the question that I like to ask. So I think when I sat down with you, I was like, who do you know who's a good title person?
Right.
And that's actually, I'm actually speaking with Gina, I think today or tomorrow about that. So
Yeah, and you have a whole array of them too, right? Like there's a whole bunch that, that could fit. It doesn't matter who it is or what is, but maybe it fits what you're doing, right? So it's great to connect with so many people, and especially moving to Jacksonville when you don't know anybody, that also helps too. And yeah, you connected with me. I'm like starting to know every single person, right? And that's great because now it helps you, and I want to help you grow into what you want to do. But that's also interesting for you because you see the benefit to the real estate community, right? I think you had told me you were doing groups up in New York, or that I don't know if it was the Connecticut area, but I think the New York area, you were all hosting groups kind of like what Yellowbird was doing. So to you understand the importance of networking with the different vendors and maybe JVing with flippers and stuff like that. So talk to us a little bit about that, because many people wonder about whether they want to get more involved with the community or get more involved with their networking group like that. What are the benefits that you've seen? Because this is going to help you for the short term, for rentals, for maybe your marketing, or diving into different niches that you didn't know were amazing in Florida. So what are those benefits to the community for you?
yeah, I mean, there's so many benefits. And like you mentioned, I had started the New York City Airbnb hosts meetup years ago. I mean, a million connections came through there, whether it was vendors, whether it was deals, came through me over the years just because I was leading that group. And then when I came down here, I mean, I can give one concrete example. I had met Pat, like I met you when I came down here. I think got lunch one day, and I came across a couple deals, and I actually didn't think the numbers worked because I was like, oh, these seem really tight. And I ran the by him. He's like, that's actually a deal. So that's a really concrete example of how like having someone in your network is like, they can, who's more experienced in the market or in any area can, I wouldn't have done that deal. I would have thrown in the trash, or
Right.
thrown in the follow-up pile, right? I don't throw any leads in the trash, but
No,
you
you
know,
got to use incomplete data. You have to, because if nobody's going after it, those are the gold nuggets.
yeah. So I mean, having people you can bounce stuff off of in your network. I mean, I'd say for anyone who's thinking about getting involved, just do it. I mean, there's so many benefits. You can JV with people, you can learn things from people. There's no reason not to get involved.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you're in that community, when you're connecting with Pat may know something that you can work on together, or maybe they're wholesaling it and you may want to buy it, or and it may be a short-term rental. So the benefit to connecting with people that even may do what you still do, there may be a niche that you're kind of branching out to that they can help with as well, or connecting like with the Whitney Richies that do insurance, or connecting with the title companies that maybe one title company does subject to but the other one doesn't, and that's what you want to do. Or it could be they're just, there's different people for different tasks. And that's why I love this whole community. I think I even told you that this Jacksonville market is amazing. The people, the business, and everybody wants to do business with each other, right? Like, I want to promote you, Mike. I want you out there. I want you all to be able to market yourselves and be out there for this kind of stuff. So even doing this with you is like a huge benefit, because we get to connect more, we get to meet here, but also at the same time, we have a recording, right? We have a podcast together. So like, it's crazy what it does, I don't know, maybe if you would have gone to Naples, who knows, would they have been doing this? I don't know. I think it was just Jacksonville was a lucky market even for you to get into as well. I mean, for me as well, I came from Miami. They had meetings and stuff. They had the business associations, which were fantastic, but they'd never had, like, I think this was a more niche, right? It was more niche in like what you and I are doing. We're doing real estate, right? Whether I'm the attorney and you're the investor, it still was a major benefit. So there's a whole side to it that is amazing in that market. So when you're doing your deals, and I love that you were talking about, like, yeah, you don't throw data away. You gather it, you take all of it, maybe you repurpose it. You may do your mailers and your mailers come back as undelivered, or you may do your text campaign, but nobody texts back. And there's a whole system to everything that you do. And one of the things you wanted to definitely talk about was using marketing for deals using data, but also I feel like it kind of goes into creating a system and automation about what you do with it, because so many get the mailers back and don't know what to do. And Tyler Austin, like, was basically like, he loves that stuff, right? He's the REI Sift, or that company over there, and he does amazing work for incomplete data. So what is your whole strategy when it comes to marketing using data, and then at the same time tweaking it for the use of making it a business?
Yeah. So I know Tyler. Tyler's actually one of the pieces of software I use in this kind of whole software stack of marketing stuff. And I use his stuff to manage my data. But, I think that, I think this a good example to take back is that, a lot of people may not know this, but there used to be this commercial brokerage in New York that actually sold to Cushman & Wakefield for about $100 million. And that brokerage was called Massey Knakal. And they had a couple things that were different. They had a whole territory system, but the part that stood out to me is that my friend, after they sold to Cushman, used to work the Upper East Side territory at Cushman & Wakefield. And what they had done is they had maintained data for every owner who they may work with in an area, right? So my friend focused on mid-market multifamily in New York. So let's call that 10 to 100 unit multifamily apartment buildings. The day that he walked into there, he already had the correct phone number for every single owner in his territory. And to me, you need to make sure you're having correct contact info. How many people skip trace a record, get 5, 6, 7, 10 phone numbers, and they're constantly calling through and texting through all of them? So why are you doing that, right? Once you have identified one number as the correct number, you should only be hitting that number, right? They're not interested now, and they say, hey, I'm not interested now, but the average person in real estate sells like every 7 years, right? So you should be in touch with that person every 4 months. And if you're in touch with them, via call or via text, then you don't necessarily need to spend the money on sending them a mailer, 50 cents or 40 cents or whatever you're paying, right? Maybe you save your mailers for people who aren't able to reach by call or text, because it's a more expensive way to reach people, but you still need to reach them. So the way I look at it is I take the entire tax roll for all of, right now I'm just focusing on Duval, but I'll roll out to St. John's and Clay County in the future. But I take the entire tax roll and I put it in REI Sift, which is Tyler's software. And then I call them kind of niche lists. And those are things that may cause a person to want to sell to an investor, right? Things like if they're behind on taxes, probate's a good example. If their water has been shut off by the city, I mean, I've got probably a dozen of these lists in there, different liens that may be against the property. And what I take that data and I focus on people who are probably the most distressed, right? So they're on multiple lists. People call it list stacking in the industry, right? And then I have a kind of a sequence that I'm building out that I reach out to them. So the first way I try to reach them is text. And if I can't get through to them by text, then they get put into a cold call campaign, who I just hired someone actually yesterday to handle the cold calling for me.
Oh, that's
and then
great.
If I can't reach them there, I'm going to start sending them mailers. And then if I can't reach them in any of those ways, then we're going to have to get really creative. And there may be a lot of kind of stuff there, because the people that no one are reaching is probably people who are your best prospects, who's the most spread in the deal, right? Probate, you've got people who you can't reach all the heirs, or you don't even know who they are, right? There's a lot of opportunity there. So the system is not done. I mean, the texting is at a really great point now where my VA is handling it all. I just, when she tags it as a lead, I handle it. Now we're getting into the cold calling part, and then, the mailer part will come soon. But I'm like crazy about maintaining my data, because I don't want to waste money on marketing. I don't want to throw data away. If I have the right phone numbers, I only want to market to those phone numbers and not all the wrong ones that I have. And why would I bother those people for no reason when I have the right number?
And that's why when Tyler Austin was on, it was fantastic. I think it was even after that episode that I was like, wow, these questions that I'm asking you all is really important, because he was talking about the different buckets, and I loved it. He was really getting into all of the buckets, and what do you do when you get this, or what do you do when you reach out 4 times, then you put it in this bucket, then you reach out and find a different method. So there's different ways to deal with incomplete data, and that's a whole other topic on its own. But I love how what you're doing is now you've hired somebody for your cold calling, right? Like you can't do everything. I can't do everything, Mike. I mean, I'm scheduling everything, but when it comes to production and stuff, it's like, I can't do it all, and distribution. So I totally understand. You do at a certain point, you have to outsource. So the way that you're scaling and you're able to move with things is doing your systems and automating and all of that amazing stuff, which is great. So marketing, though, is everything, right? So you can get the deals, you can have 5 or 6 deals, but if you don't have a great marketing system in place, it's going to be hard to keep scaling and mass producing what you're really good at. And I had a guest on, Dora Nissim, from the Miami, West Palm Beach, Broward area, that talked about that. He said, oh, you can get deals. There's a way to get deals. But if you can't market, you're not going to get to that level. I love marketing. I know you love marketing. We can talk about marketing stuff all day. But what are your favorite strategies when it comes to the marketing side to things? And what are some interesting new tactics you've been developing? Great tips and tricks for people that are really interested. I'm like, what are people doing differently than what I am? Well, the investor is. What are those methods that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer that you can't automate something until you've actually figured out how to do it manually. So the first thing my goal to figure out, besides the data collection, was let's get this SMS marketing channel going, right? Let's figure out the best way to respond to people. Let's figure out the best way to get the highest response rates, so we know which phone numbers are correct. So I did that. I was in there myself, for about a week straight, just me doing the SMS, right? It's kind of a grueling job, but you got to do it, right? So I built out that system, and then I handed it over to my VA, who now handles it for me. And then, it was still a work in progress for 2-3 weeks. I'd jump in there, I'd record some screen share videos, give her feedback, tweak our responses. And now I feel like that's in a good place. So what happens now is that, like I said, she tags it as a lead, and then it comes to me, right? So the next thing that I'm going to move over to is a cold calling. And like I said, I hired an outside vendor there. So it's more just making sure all the data flows back correctly. But where I think like a lot of the magic comes in is the follow-up, right? So I've built on top of an existing marketing software that people in the real estate industry don't use, but it's huge in the marketing industry. I've built, and it's still much a work in progress, is this kind of CRM follow-up system, right? So everything is put into a campaign. So like my VA will tag it as a lead, then I'm calling it, and then it will put it into actually a power dialer for me. So I'm not wasting time. Every day I just go in the afternoon, I sit there, I dial for 2.5 hours, right? I've got my tasks that I have to do. It jumps from one contact to the next. And then when I speak to the person, I say, okay, are they a hot lead? They want to sell in 30 days or less, or they warm, maybe they want to sell in, 30 to 90 days, or are they cold? And then they get thrown into a follow-up system and kind of queued up there. Or they're not interested, and then maybe we follow up with them 4 or 5 months down the line. So being able to just have a really organized way to do all that, and it automates as much as I can, right? I mean, you can't automate being on the phone with a seller. Like, you need to talk to them. You need to understand like what their timeframes are, what works for them, what doesn't. But then, you're managing hundreds of leads. You need to get that into a system so that you never miss a follow-up, right? So if they said, hey, Mike, call me in 3 months, I'll put them in the cold campaign. I'm going to get in touch with them before 3 months, because I usually cut the time in half. And then they'll have a task there, but they'll also have they just get added to my power dialer every 45 days. I'll drop them a text message. And then I've started experimenting with some other cool stuff around, a lot of these people I talk to, they're getting calls from so many investors, right? A common thing I'll get is, Mike, you're the 5th investor I've talked to today. They want to sell, but there's tons of people trying to get them an offer, right? So I was like, how do I get ahead of the pack there, right? How do I separate myself? Because I'll call back a week later and they're like, who are you? Which investor are you? And I was like, that's an issue. So it's one thing I started doing for the hot leads is, after I speak with them, it creates an automatic task on my calendar. And the next day I'll create a 30-second, 1 minute, just like FaceTime video for them, and I'll text it to them. And I'll say, hey, Al, it was great speaking to you yesterday. Sometimes on the phone it feels really impersonal. I just wanted to let you know that, like, this is me on the other side. I'm down in Jacksonville here. Like, I'm really easy to work with, whatever, right? And just now they have a face that connects it with the phone, the voice on the phone. And there's some other stuff I'm doing there too. After we jump off a call, I'm sending them a link to my website so I can retarget them on Facebook with ads after. So suddenly they're going to start seeing my face on videos all over Facebook. They're going to get that the next day. Something I'm rolling out this weekend is I'm going to trigger a personalized handwritten letter to someone who's a hot lead. So I'll say, I sent one out the other day, like, it was a pleasure speaking with you. Here's my contact info. And there's actually some companies out there that will handwrite the letters for you and mail them for you for a couple bucks. These are not mass. These are individual, personalized one-to-one. I know there's companies that do them in mass. That's different. And those are fine too, but this is a different purpose. It's to stay the front of mind with that seller.
Is it marketing by hand with Jeff Rhodes?
I use a company called Handwritten, but there's a ton of them.
Oh yeah, because I had Jeff on my show as well. He does all of the handwritten stuff. He can get you a neat handwriter. He can get you a messy handwriter. He'll get you the first class. Wait till you see that episode, Mike, because when you're talking about this, it's really fascinating. I asked Jeff about that like 2 years ago. I was like, if it's too neat, they won't read it. But if it's like messy, it makes it look like that was a real human that wrote it. And it's like amazing, even though you would think it's not neat. So yeah, no, that's great that you're doing that for hot leads.
Yeah, and it's really like it's to the point where I'm getting it all triggered, right? So all I got to do in my CRM is add a tag to it, and boom, it shoots that letter out the next day, addresses it to them. And all I'm trying to do at that point is I'm trying to be the person that they remember, right? Because they've spoken to so many investors. I can't tell you how many sellers, like, in the last few weeks until I started doing this, had a great conversation with them. They said, call me back in 2 weeks. I called them back and they wouldn't remember which investor I was because they had so many conversations, right? I'm like, that is something that I need to solve. So I've got a whole list of tactics that I'm testing, but these are the ones that are being tested right now.
Yeah, that is fantastic. I really like the one where the phone can be an impersonal way to contact people. And then when you have that ability to say, hey, so-and-so, this is Mike, that is a question I I could ask is, how do you stand out from the pack? And how you are is by using those techniques. And maybe there are people out there that are already doing that. But I can tell you, when you told me that, that's probably the first time I've heard of that. Fascinating. Because again, I don't do what you do, Mike. I don't do what Pat and Kyle and Ron LeGrand, I don't do anything like that. But when we get down to it, a lot of this just comes down to, this is business. This is marketing, isn't just real estate, it's everything else, right? So if you can think of creative stuff, that's why it's amazing to have you people on, because it's great to hear it. And then to really categorize who's the hot lead, the warm lead, and what then you do with that marketing strategy, or then linking them to your website, right? So what does the website do? It legitimizes you as somebody that is really out there. You're not just like hiding behind the phone. You're like, it's Mike McKay, right? Like, you are out there. This is what your business, you invest in homes, and it's probably an amazing website that feels friendly, approachable, like, this is what you have to offer. And so my signature question on my show is, how do you build trust between you and the seller? I've had different answers. Like Ron was like, it's not about trust, it's about creative solutions. I've had others explain that too. And I've had even Dom and G gave their great answer just by talking to people, like really, communicating with people, which is big. So I would say almost kind of what you said answers that question, but what strategies are you implementing to really not only just build that trust initially, but also continue to the end, right? It's all about beginning and end. How are you continuing that trust throughout also?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing when building trust is you got to do what you say you're going to do, right? So if I say I'm going to call a seller back tomorrow at noon, not only am I going to call them back the next day at noon, and even if they don't pick up, I'm going to say, hey, I'm calling you back at noon like you asked me to do. And that way I'm like, I'm a person who does what I say I'm going to do. Because how many sellers get calls, they tell an investor to call them back, and they never hear from them again, or they hear from them a couple of days later, not when they said they were going to call, right? So you got to be the person who does what you say you're going to do, because they think that translates, and it does, to, is this person going to close when they say they're going to do? Are they going to pay the price they say they're going to, right? So just have to always do what you say you're going to do. And then it's building that personal connection, right? So those videos, those are just tactics, right? The video, the handwritten letter, the retargeting on Facebook, like those are tactics. But my website is very, I paid a friend of mine who's a great, website UX designer, and he designed it. He did a lot of research on competitors and in, all over the country, and who's doing the best. And he was like, it's the people who are doing the best are people who are building like the personal connection on their website. No one who's selling their home cares about this big company. There's plenty of those out there, right? There's the Zillows, there's the Open Doors that are buying houses now, but I put my face front and center on the website. There's pictures of me. There's pictures of me hanging out with my dog, with my girlfriend, right? I'm here. I'm in Jacksonville. Like, I will come meet you. I'm not some faceless company, right? And I think that sellers like to work with someone like that, as opposed to the 1,000 people who work for Zillow or Open Door, right? Nothing against those companies. They're doing some cool stuff, but we're kind of approaching it from a different angle. So that's my story. The personal connection is everything.
Yeah, those are great strategies, Mike, and you should keep doing and keep tweaking. I think you have that mind where you keep thinking about like the next level, next thing, about how do I continue to get in the front of the pack, like when 5 or 6 people are doing it. And so the other thing was interesting that you said, and you glossed over it quickly, but I picked up on it, was the use of the website. So then your ads are targeting them. What's that strategy in the marketing? Because so if I look up shoes or if I look up clothes, all of a sudden, like on the right hand column of the browser, it's like every shoe, and I'm like, I'm not looking that up. I already looked you up before. Why are you showing me again? But it's all about, they got you, they're targeting you, they want you to see it. So what is that strategy that you're doing with the website and ad campaign?
Yeah, I mean, so you can do it through Google or Facebook. I mean, I really don't know that much about Google ads, so I'm doing it mostly with Facebook now. But, like you said, you go to a website and they start following you around, right? And they call it retargeting in the marketing space. And it's because most people, like first time they go somewhere, you didn't buy that pair of shoes the first time. Maybe you need to see it a few times and build trust with the brand, right? So the idea is, after I talk to a seller on the call, I'm sending them a link to my website. First of all, they can look me up, they can browse through, it makes them feel more comfortable, right? But then after that, I'm on their Facebook news feed. I'm talking about how it works on some videos on their news feed. I'm talking about, different things, right? And it's just staying in front of them and reminding them who I am, and that I'm there, right? And I'm spending it's like $1 a day, right, on Facebook to stay in front of people. And also, we're working on some SEO stuff. We haven't ranked yet. I've had a friend of mine working on that. But once we start to get traffic there, most people who come from Google, they're not going to put their info on your website the first time. So I got to get back in front of them on another channel and remind them to come back, and that, we're still buying, right? And I think that's one of the ways that you can do that, is being all over their newsfeed on Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, first of all, the SEO and ranking is tricky too. That takes it could take anywhere between 6 months to a year, but you have to have the right key terms and posting and science. And then, or there's doing Google ads, which is also a way to get it to the top really quickly, but you gotta pay per click also. But there's those different strategies for people out there, which is really, really, really critical. So you would say, when it came to the building systems and automation, obviously the marketing is a major component for you, but are there any other strategies that you're doing to automation with your business, right? So the CRM that you touched on is key. I need even more CRM, right? When you get leads, you want to make sure you keep up with the leads, just like sellers. Sometimes clients that call, you never hear from again, or unless you follow up, or right, same thing, no different. It's all business. I forgot who I told the other day. It's all the same, real estate or not. It's still business, and these are business strategies that you're all doing that makes a ton of sense. So are there any other ways that you are keeping that system flowing in a nice fluid machine?
I do a lot of outsourcing, right? So I have, a virtual assistant. So she'll do tons of stuff for me around like cleaning up data, answering texting. So that's more kind of outsourcing as opposed to automation. But, it's kind of automation because I don't have to deal with it, right? So those things, I mean, I'd have to really dive in and think. I automate so much stuff just across everything. With my calendar, I use Calendly like you do, Al. So if you want to jump on a call, we don't have to do this like 10 times back and forth. Just pick a time and we'll jump on. All those like little things that just get me time back in my day. I do those. I'm like a power user of Zapier, which is like a kind of if this then that between software. But I've probably got dozens of those. I don't even remember that some of them are working until something flows into my system. So the answer is I automate tons of stuff, but I think we covered the big ones around marketing.
Great. Because like you said, I love Calendly. That totally saves time in my business. I've gotten to that point. As soon as maybe I'll have to get with you about how you link it with Outlook, because I still don't get how you link it with Outlook, but I love the whole Calendly because it was so easy, right? Click, set up the appointment, and it automatically links both of you up for the meeting. You're in here, I'm in here, no questions. Like, I love that too. Believe me, that was a game changer and worth every price. So one of the signature questions I ask on my show, and it could be about probate, it could be about any other things. We'll get into biggest deal killer. So when it comes to your deals, what is one of the biggest deal killers that you come across? Because it could be title, it could be appraisers, it could be mortgages. The lenders are not doing the approvals the right way, or they're taking way too long. There's so many ways it can go. And obviously we're going to dive into probate later, because we can't get off the show without talking about probate. Even though you're so new to this market, you're seeing the bigger picture with probate. So in your world, in the Mike McKay world, what is the biggest deal killer you come across?
I think the biggest one I probably see is that there's someone else on the property who has a different idea about what they should do with it than the person I'm talking to, right? That could be a spouse. That could be, we were talking about one hour, we got 3 brothers who own it. and one is living there, and the other two want to sell, and this one doesn't, right? So it's always another person who's on the property who seems to can hold things up. So that's what I've found.
Yeah. So holding things up, I mean, there's so many ways this answer can go, and I get different answers from different people all the time. Like with Dom and G, it was that the tenants or the sellers don't let them in after a couple times, or it's like even getting into the property, right? It's getting inside. Or I'll have ones that talk about, even from the title companies, like I think it was Lisa Andrews was talking about, it's the appraisal. It's the appraisal that ends up being a problem. So hearing that side of it from you, I mean, there can be so many things that hold up the deals. And I see it from the title end, right? Like, from my perspective, when it comes to your deals, I mean, if the probate gets done quickly, the next question is, well, when's closing, right? And then you and I are like, oh yeah, closing's going to be in about 10 days. And it's like never in 10 days. It's in about like 30 to 45 days, and then may get pushed off. So everybody's got a different perspective and a different theme when it comes to like what is a deal killer and what in respect to what their market is. And you just never know what it's going to be. You never know, but in your deals, Mike, so you can do all of the marketing. You can do all of the reaching out and have your whole system built out with VAs, and you can get your leads, whether they're warm or they're hot. But at the end of the day, for you, it's about locking up your deal. So what are some real interesting tips and tricks about fully locking the deal with that seller?
It's all follow up, right? At the end of the day, I'd rather lose a deal because I followed up with someone too much than because I didn't follow up with them enough and someone else got in there, right? So someone says, call me in a month, I'm calling them in 2 weeks. They say, call me in 2 months, I'm calling them in a month. So it's really about just constantly following up. And it goes back to like doing what you say you're going to do, right? I'll follow up with you now. Okay, I'm going to follow up with you then, right? And I'll probably follow up with you a few times before that. So really just being on top of managing your leads and staying in touch with the follow up, because most deals in real estate don't come on the first phone call when a lead comes in. I mean, sure, you have those here and there, right? Someone's really got to sell, but the majority of them, you got to, hold the relationship with them, for a couple months, stay in touch, and then the deal happens.
Right. It's all about the follow-up. Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, I love follow-up anytime you're either networking or you're dealing with clients or sellers. It's all about like being proactive. I'm a big proponent of that. Being proactive, not the reactive, and following up. And you have to. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere, and then that lead is going to be cold, ice cold. So great. A simple tip, right, Mike? Simple concepts that you would think there's like got to be some kind of magical chemistry formula to it. And there's really not. It's all about consistency, following up, being in front, top of mind. That really, at the end of the day, is what is driving your business and driving your real estate business, right? It's just, that's all it is.
Yeah. And all those systems I talk about just make that easier, right? They don't replace what you have to do. They just tell you, oh, you got to call. You told the person you would call today, or, they're in a follow-up campaign and you can automate some of the touches, right? But it still has to happen.
Right. Still has to happen. You still have to do those core things and to take it to the next level. So, I can't get off the show without talking about probate. I don't know if you had ever heard about probate in New York. I don't know if it was a completely different system there. And now you come down here and you're hearing all about it, right? It's all out there, So talk to me about, what you've seen probate wise, like what you think about probate in the realm of real estate.
So before I met you, actually, I had a lot of misconceptions about probate. I pretty much avoided it like the plague because I was like, oh, that stuff takes 6 months. I don't have time for that. Too much paperwork, right? And then I found out that's not the case, actually. So I'm actually starting to look more into it. Yeah, I pretty much wrote it off for the longest time because I was like, I'll focus my energy elsewhere. But now that I realize that it doesn't have to take that long, kind of my eyes are opened to this new place where I could source deals.
Right. Yeah, no, it's for sure. I mean, if you see it, you have to see it from a way of like, can this be efficient? Is everybody on board? Can this work and happen? And is it as simple as it can be if it's just one house, and that's it, not some crazy fighting and everybody doesn't get along? I mean, when you have those, then sure, then that's what you're thinking of, the all of those 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. I've seen 3 years, so I get it. When it comes to that probate world, if you have it's all business, right? Being efficient, being upfront with everything. And if you can figure out that system, it's no different. Now you solve the puzzle and you solve the issue that you were looking for this whole time. And now it's opened up a new horizon for you, a new niche in the markets in Florida. And, it doesn't get better than the Florida real estate market. So you're in and you're in Jacksonville. Mike, if there are people listening to this, I know there's going to be, how can people get in touch with you? And also, who are you looking for to connect and reach out to you as far as maybe JVing or short-term rental or buying together, whatever it is? How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, so anyone can just add me on Facebook, Michael McKay. We'll probably have a bunch of mutual friends. It'll be easy to find me there. Or you can just shoot me an email, which is Michael-McKay, MCKAY.com. So there's a dash between Michael and McKay in the domain. Unfortunately, someone else already owned the other one. So I'm stuck there. But yeah, reach out to me. And people I'd love to meet is like, look, if you're active in this market and investing in any type of way, or you work with investors in any type of way, like, I'm new here. I want to meet everyone who's involved in the real estate market here. So I'm happy to connect with anyone. I'm hungry to learn this market. I'm hungry to meet people here. So, let's talk.
Yeah. And I love what your shirt says. Success is the journey. So Mike is all about finding the ways to get the success, because it's not a sprint, it's a marathon in life. And so, by having the right tools, the right network, the right people in place, that you can be successful in what you do with this market. And we'll make sure, Mike, that everybody's got your social links when it gets posted to the iTunes, the Spotify, and the YouTube channel. It's going everywhere. It's crazy. So we'll make sure people have your links and they know how to get in touch with you, especially when it comes to the Airbnb, the short-term rental, and you're the buyer, right? You can be the buyer. Maybe they're wholesalers looking to reach out or connect with you on that end. So Mike, I'm so happy you were able to do this. I'm so happy we were able to sit down and record this for the show. When I have my studio, I want you back. I want you here, and we can do the in-person. That's why it's so different when it's via Zoom. The connectivity, the internet, it's just so different. When you're in person, there's a different dynamic. And that's why I'm so excited that this eventually will be a studio. This all is going to be a podcast studio plus my office, which is going to be crazy, but I want you back. It's going to be a fun time. We'll dive deeper on some of this stuff that we can go back and forth on in person.
Yeah, I'm excited to be back, and this was great. Thanks for having me, Al.
Yeah, Mike, it's an absolute pleasure. We'll be talking after once the show concludes. So thanks again so much for being here. We'll get together soon. Okay.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, everybody, if you want more content like this, make sure you check out the Al Nicoletti YouTube channel, the Al Nicoletti Facebook page, and you can find all these podcasts on the Al Nicoletti Show, iTunes, and Spotify. Episodes are posted weekly. I just launched about a week ago, so we will get down to all the episodes coming out week by week. So make sure you check them out. The videos will be on YouTube, and the micro content and the quotes will be on the Facebook channel. So make sure you check those out. And also, I'm doing stuff on probate, quiet title, partitions, and different real estate stuff and content. So make sure you check that out. And I will see you next time on the Al Nicoletti Show. Take care.